Welcome to this week's Real Talk with Jill and Tia. And as you can see, our special guest, Kevin Chapman. Welcome, Kevin.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome to Real
Thank
Talk.
you. Thank you.
Yes, and hello to
Good to
our
see you.
audience for being here today. This is a topic. Like if you've done any webinars or anything with Catalyst, we use a lot of physical movement with our webinars and in our programs. So we're excited to have Kevin here because of this interaction of physical intelligence and how it relates to your performance.
Yes, we are. So welcome. And you know how we like to start off, like share where you're joining us from.
Yes.
We love to see. So drop in the chat and say hello. As soon as we let Kevin talk, you'll know that he is not native from the United States. And I love that because then we get to see too, like where everybody's from. Kevin, where are you actually from?
Well, I live in London. That's where I normally live. But you can tell from the bright light, I'm actually at the moment sitting in Arizona. So this is rather lovely to be sitting in 85 degrees heat down near Tucson.
Yeah, and here in the States, we've been battling with heat. Really, internationally, across the world, has been battling with heat and wildfires and that type of thing. But you were also talking about when you go back to London, it actually might be a little on the chillier side.
It'll be chilly, and I think we had the wettest summer, coolest summer on record. So, yeah.
So you're avoiding a little bit of that.
I'm just avoiding that as long as I can.
Well, we'll be able to do it a little bit longer then. So
right.
Well, good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to hide.
We're so happy that you could join us and and then that makes the time zone difference even a little bit smaller. So thank you for being with us. Our guests are in for a treat today.
Yes, they are. They are. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm Tia, this is Jill, and we host Real Talk every week on Wednesdays. And we really do have real talk about how do you become a better leader where you are. And we cover many, many different topics, but the ones that are super passionate to us are ones around helping to advance everyday leaders. That really is our mission. How do we help you be a better leader in food so that you can work on things like culture, right? And engagement and retention, workload, all of those things that really are stressors in our workplace. We know that if we become better leaders, we can have better solutions and better business outcomes. And that's what we like to do at Catalyst. We love to partner with organizations to help them and their missions with better outcomes, right, through their leaders. And we would love to talk with you. So if this is what you are also passionate about and this is what you're doing in your work, we would love to connect even more. And I gave a little brief snippet of why this concept of physical intelligence is important to us at Catalyst, because we use movement, but we are super excited about in breath. So we're super excited about Kevin because Kevin, you are a guru in this space, and so we're excited to learn from you today and hear your perspective. So I'll kick it over to you and have you introduce yourself to our audience and what led you to where you are today.
Thank you. Oh, nice to be called a guru. Yes, well, we're all experienced, aren't we? Because the one thing we've all got in common is we all have a body. And I hope everyone's brought it along today because we're going to explore and use that a little bit. But my background is I actually did my degree in mathematical statistics. And then I spent my life working with people. And that sounds like a bit of a change of career. But I was always interested in patterns and predicting things. And it turns out that people are quite predictable, that we run patterns. And so when I was about 27, I decided to train as a coach. And I met this amazing man called Dr. Terry Morgan. And he said to me, if you want to be a coach, and this applies to leadership as well, whether we're leading ourselves, teams at work, whether we're leading at home, our families, he said you need a really good theory of how a human being works, which I thought was a slightly odd question. And he said, I'd like to come to the first class, I'd like to draw a picture of a human being and explain how it works to the room. Because he said if you took your car to a mechanic, you'd expect the mechanic to know how a car works. So how does a human being work? 'Cause that's what you're working with. Well, I can tell you now, my stick person was not very well formed. And it's, if you're watching this now, this is a very good exercise. All these things we work with as leaders, as human beings: energy, confidence, passion, trust, anger, regret. All of these kind of invisible forces, motivation. What are these things that we're working with, that we're trying to get more of for ourselves, from other people, when we're trying to lead them, trying to get people to lean in, to listen to us? So I spent 25 years from there refining my stick person and refining my model of how this whole human being works. And the punchline is, it turns out we're more than just a head. So I don't know if it resonates with people listening, but it can feel sometimes in life that we're ahead, because that's kind of how we experience life. And the body kind of walks the head around from meeting to meeting, from Zoom room to Zoom room. And this body gets tired, it aches, and we kind of take it for granted until it starts to let us down. But the truth is, I'm going to reveal today that the technology that we all have available to us today that we can really take advantage of is the technology of the body. We've got this incredible untapped technology that we can use to help us be confident, have more strength, have more flexibility, to be more resilient, to have all of the outcomes we want in life, all available to us free 24/7 if we just know how. And because we've all had a body all of our life, we all have experiences of bringing the best out of our body. So if people have experiences that they want to share in the chat, I'm sure many people on the call do yoga, or they exercise well, or maybe there's triathletes or nutritionists. So there's a lot of things we're doing in our life where we're fundamentally powering and using the power of our body. But I'm going to show you a broader model of how we can use this untapped intelligence. And we call that physical intelligence, using the untapped intelligence of the body. So that's kind of the offer today. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about the theory, but more than that, we're going to do some practice. And because I can only see Jill and Tia, they're going to do some practice with me. Going to give you some techniques and show you where to go for some more content on that. If you are driving or you are anywhere that's unsafe, please don't do this. Just listen in. And anything that we do on the call, please make sure you adapt that to suit your own body. If you've got any disabilities or illnesses or injuries, I do like to say that. So that's the kind of setup for this today. Okay.
Yes, I'm excited about this because, especially, our audience, as we talked about, most of our audience comes from the food world. And when we talk about some of the challenges that they encounter, there are things that are very similar, right, to other humans, whether it's, feeling overworked or overwhelmed, or I think, as you mentioned, all of a sudden my body, something gave out, my knee, my ankle, I'm having a pain here, my back. And I love this conversation because our body is giving us signals all the time. And some of the tools you're going to walk us through are like, how do we become more connected to our body? Because we don't have to get to the point where we feel overwhelmed and then it really creates these other challenges for us. We would have gotten signals early on saying, ooh, slow down, you'll climb ahead, bridge is out. And yet often we still are going full speed to the bridge thinking we can like jump it or something. So I think this is a fantastic conversation for people to not only just have self-knowledge of how they work, but some addition, like moving to more self-awareness to be able to act upon the signals they're getting.
Yeah, that's one thing, Jill, I tell you this all the time, working with you, when I'm like, oh, my head, because I have headaches, and I'm like, oh, my head has been hurting, more than normal or over these last 3 days. And she's like, what is your body telling you? And it's just like, oh, that's right. I need to pay attention because my body is actually trying to tell me something.
So we're excited, Kevin.
Yes.
We are
Let's start
here and
there.
we are
Well,
ready to have you lead us.
Yes.
let's start there. Let's start by getting into our bodies, and let's talk about being present and having presence. So the mind is amazing. Let's just take a moment. The mind is very helpful and also very unhelpful. Our minds can travel through time. So if I was to ask you to think about what you did yesterday, where you were, and where you might be tomorrow, and where you might be in the future. So our minds can travel in time, and our minds can travel in distance. I could ask you now to think about leaving the room or the space you're in and maybe walking somewhere else or going to a destination. So our minds really aren't very present. And if you're listening in now, I'm sure some of you are looking at the screen and answering emails or thinking about a meeting that you've got. Okay, so this is a very natural human condition. So one of the things we really want as leaders is to be able to access presence and to be present and in the moment, particularly when we're with others, where we need to make connection, create empathy, create good relationships. So how do we do that, given our mind is all over the place? And the answer is very simply, we drop into our body. Because the only thing that's truly present at any time is our body. Our body is here, now, in the moment. So the question is, how do we drop into our body? And the simplest way to do that, and one of the biggest life hacks, is through our breath. Okay, so breath is fundamentally transformational. I'm sure many people on the call might use breath practices, whether you're an athlete or you do meditation or yoga or whether you pray. So some of us might use breath patterns. Sometimes these things can sound a bit woo-woo, but actually breath is the only part of our automatic system in our body that we can hack ourselves. And it has a transformational effect on the nervous system and the chemistry of the body. I'll talk a bit about the chemistry, but we're going to use our breath now to drop into our bodies and become present. Okay, and this is a lovely way also of creating more presence, more leadership presence for yourself, simply by dropping into the body. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. It's called introception. I'm going to talk a bit about why introception is a game changer for your capability. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to stand up and sit down from time to time because I'm going to move around. And you may notice we don't move much. Moving is very, very important for our health and well-being, but also for our chemistry. So the easiest way to drop into our body, and if you're finding you're resisting this as an idea, that's good intelligence for you alone. So that brain is buzzing away. We're going to drop into the body by dropping our breath into our diaphragm. So we can breathe in a number of ways. We can breathe into our chest, or we can breathe into our diaphragm. Now, when we breathe into our chest, you may notice, and you might want to try it. If you breathe into your chest, in and out, and the faster you do this, the kind of more extreme this gets, you may find that it stresses you. So breath into the chest often creates a sort of stress response. Our body is communicating to our mind. So the physicality that we hold communicates to our brain kind of how we feel, what's important. So breath into the chest often triggers a bit of a stress response and might make us feel a bit
shallow breath,
nervous.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And a shallow breath into the chest. So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is to breathe into the diaphragm, into the belly. For some people, this might be quite easy. Some people might find this a little bit more challenging. But the way to do that is to put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly. And then if I'm breathing into my diaphragm, then my bottom hand is going to rise and fall. If I'm breathing into my chest, my top hand is going to rise and fall. So this is a practice to develop for yourself. So dropping the breath into the diaphragm, grounding your feet on the floor. Can you feel your feet? Our feet have something like 20,000 nerve endings. So if we want to be grounded, if we want to be present, our feet on the floor, feeling the feet on the floor. Just relaxing any tension we have in the knees, and then dropping our breath into our belly, into our diaphragm. Just take a moment to do that. It might feel like quite a luxury. Take a moment to get present. And what I'm going to ask you to do before we do a breath exercise, I'm going to ask you, see if you can detect in your body your underlying mood right now. Can you detect your underlying mood right now? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling agitated? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Can you detect your emotional state? Now, if we had the chat running crazy, we'd ask you to put in the chat your underlying state. Is it a helpful state? Or is it an unhelpful state? Do you have tinges of resentment? Do you have... What's going on in you? So this is, what we're doing here is something called introception. We're dropping into our body and we're actually detecting our underlying mood, our state. Our state is incredibly important because our state is going to largely dictate, this is surprising, how we feel, how we behave, and how we think. Even our thoughts are going to come from this state. So see if you can detect that. Just dropping into your body and building your introception, this ability to feel. Research from Dr. Amanda Blake on her PhD concluded that this both increases your capacity and your capability. So just in terms of being a leader, this increases your capacity and capability around things like accessing empathy, being connected, being able to manage conflict, having resilience, having adaptability, being able to flourish. Just the act of dropping into the body and feeling. So I would invite everyone listening to this to adopt this as a daily practice. If you're feeling overwhelmed, which is often going on in the head, to drop into the body. Okay.
Yeah, we often encourage
so this is
people
where we
to think
start.
Oh, sorry, I was going to add to that, Kevin. So often we talk as leaders, like, how do we show up? And so often we'll have leaders who are like, I never really thought about that. I don't even know how I'm feeling. But this is kind of that core of giving them the messages of like, what is it that, how is this translating how they're feeling into the actions and the energy that they're bringing to the room for others?
Yeah.
So being able to connect to this is so powerful.
And typically the leader, as the leader, right, you are the one that's setting the pace in the room. So being aware of where you are, how you're feeling, how you're showing up is key to even how a meeting will run, or a one-on-one, or talking with your manager. All of those, leading a project, all of those things are related to how you show up to the situation.
Yeah, totally. So this is a nice practice. We'll do a little bit of breath work, but this is a nice practice to sort of recenter yourself, from which as a leader I can flex into a style or a mode that I need for that situation. So there's going to be times in your life as a leader where you need more authority. Is that true? Where you need to walk into a situation, you've got to have this inner strength. You've got to be able to hold space. You've got to be able to be assertive but not aggressive, to speak up, to maybe have a little bit of risk tolerance, to be able to stand your ground, okay? So you need to be able to lean into that mode of being, and we can talk about the chemistry of that. And then you might leave that meeting and there's somebody in your team who needs you, says, I've got a problem, there's something going on, I need your help, I need you to listen to me. And here you are in that driven mode. You've just stepped up to the fight.
Superpower.
Okay. You're right. All right.
Yes, I guess and you may find this is a strength, right? You may find you spend a lot of time in this mode. It's super easy to be in that mode. Other people find that mode a little bit more difficult to access. If you're more of a compassionate, empathetic type of person, that might be a flex, okay? We can still do it, but it's a flex. And then you have a meeting with a team member who says, oh, I'm having a terrible time. I need you to listen to me. And you're like, what is it? Come on. So we need to access. Don't we? This is resonating, right? Come on, what is it? Let's fix this problem. And they're like, I just want you to listen to me. I'm having a terrible day. So I don't have time for this. I'm going to make stuff happen. Okay, so we need to access a slightly different version of ourselves, don't we? And so that will be empathy and compassion. So the route to empathy and compassion is often through that grounded state. So we need to come out of this state of authority and drive into a state of neutrality, from which I can flex into a state of empathy. Okay. Now, the great thing about states is we go through them all the time. Okay. We trigger a state just when we see somebody. In fact, I could say to you, think of somebody you really struggle with that you've got unfinished business with. Okay. Just the mere thought of them. Does anybody feel like, oh, I've got to go and have a conversation with somebody who did me some wrong in the past? So the mere thought of that person changes your internal chemistry. Often that spikes your cortisol levels, okay, puts you into that threat response, and there you are, you're ready for the fight or the flight. So we talk about the nervous system being triggered, often into fight or flight. Often happens when people speak. As leaders, we speak a lot. I like to talk about the fact that as leaders, we're constantly on stage, okay? We're either on stage where we're talking to many people, we're on stage talking to small teams, or we're on stage, I'm walking into a stage where I'm speaking to somebody in my team. Okay, so we're kind of always on. And for some people, speaking can make us quite nervous, particularly if we don't know what to say or we're feeling a bit on the spot. We're being asked questions. So this grounded state of presence, this dropping the breath into the diaphragm, is the fastest way to change the part of our nervous system that's running the whole show of the body and mind. Okay, so when we're triggered and we're nervous, we're in the sympathetic mode of our nervous system, the kind of fight-flight response. And that system is designed not to make us communicate well, not to make us connect. That's designed to either help us step up to the fight or flee. Which is why if you struggle, anybody here struggles from nerves when they speak, it's very, very natural. We stand in front of a lot of people, we feel threatened, the nervous system gets triggered, cortisol rises, adrenaline rises, our heartbeat rises, and our body is preparing us to fight or run away. Okay, and there's a good reason for that, because if a lion ran into the room right now, okay, what I don't want to do is have a reaction which is, that's interesting, there's a lion in the kitchen. They're much bigger than they're big lions. Lions are big. Yesterday we saw a rattlesnake, okay? I was not leaning into the rattlesnake going, oh, all right. Big black diamond. So we are wired genetically, okay? Our brain is here to keep us safe. It's a prediction machine. So we're wired to trigger that part of the nervous system. The chemistry changes. The blood starts racing. Adrenaline is pumped. I'm ready for action. I do not have a calm, clear mind that can think clearly under pressure. That's why when we're speaking, public speaking, we suddenly freeze and we go, I can't remember what I was going to say. What you'll often notice is the breath will rise into the chest, the heartbeat will go up, the brain turns off, and we get even more stressed.
And you know, Kevin, I think this,
even see it.
Once again, I think this can happen. It's interesting because these are things that people in food, especially food safety and quality, we encounter on a regular basis, where all of a sudden somebody comes to us with this problem. Like, gosh, we might have to recall product or shut the line down. And you have to go, really? That's interesting. Even though inside you may be getting, I'd love for you to talk about this part too, right? Sometimes inside you're like, oh no, the panics buttons are going off, even though outside you're like, Well, tell me more about that.
Let's talk more.
So that's a lovely example of where your state's been triggered. Everything was going okay until something happened, right? Okay. This is a story of life. And in fact, this is a story, and I've got a background in performing arts, and I ran the commercial business of a world famous drama school for 6 years. But the story, right? What makes story interesting? Our stories are interesting because we go through life like the character in every film or a play you've ever seen. Everything's going fine, isn't it? Until one day something happens. Until the rabbit goes down the hole. And so this happens in our life. We think we're in control of everything, and then something happens. So that something triggers our state. Now, the good news is we can control our state. There's only two things as leaders we have control over. So these are the things we need to master. The first one is our time and focus. How you spend your time and what you focus on is in your control. Okay? Do you focus on the past, the future? Do you focus on what's going well? Do you focus on things that are problems? You get what you focus on. What you focus on, where your energy goes, is how you're going to experience life. So we need to be very conscious of our focus. The second thing we can control, which we're talking about today, is our state, our internal neurochemical state. So we get triggered. What do? We want to reverse the chemistry of that triggering, okay, that threat response, that being on the back foot. So we're going to do that through breath. The fastest way to do that is through breath. When we breathe into the diaphragm, when we ground our feet, when we release tension, we're changing the internal chemistry of the body. And we're engaging what's called the vagus nerve in our body. So we're going to flip from the sympathetic part of our nervous system into the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. This is the part of the nervous system that allows us to connect and communicate and think clearly. If we're feeling quite chaotic and overwhelmed, we need to get into the body. We need to create an environment of coherence in the body. Coherence, interestingly enough, is actually about the heart being coherent. The heart communicates more to the brain than the brain does to the heart. So through our breath, if we can get our breath patterns right, we can get our heart into coherence, we can get our brain into coherence. One leads the other. So I'm going to show you one breath pattern that's a game changer that I would invite everyone to build into their life. And I'll talk a bit about the chemistry of the magic of this high performance steroid called DHEA. And this is a pattern called paced breathing. This is very simply, and people may have done this if you've meditated or done yoga. We're going to breathe into our diaphragm, and we're going to breathe smoothly and rhythmically and deliberately in and out of our diaphragm. And I prefer to use the nose. If people are interested in breath work, there's some wonderful books. There's a book called Breathe by James Nestor, who looks at the science of nose breathing versus mouth breathing. But the conclusion is you want to be breathing through your nose, a game changer for your life. So breathing through the nose, and we're going to breathe in for 5 seconds, and we're going to breathe out for 5 seconds. So we're going to be smoothly and rhythmically and deliberately breathing in and out. And we're going to be practicing rather than what we do in the gym, which is try and hold our bellies in and have a nice tight six-pack. We actually want our diaphragm to be rising and falling. So should we just do a few breaths? And I know this is going to feel like a luxury, but I'll show you some of the science of this. So we're going to breathe in for 5 through the nose and breathe out for 5. Taking your time, breathe in for 5. And then out for 5. We'll do one more together. And then out for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just before we stop doing that, just take a moment now to drop into your body. And how's that changed? How's your internal state changed? How's your mood changed? How do you feel just having done that for 20 seconds? And if Jill and Tia, if you want to comment. Sure.
Well, yeah, I feel like calm, like my energy has shifted down, but not in a bad way, just in a way where it's just this kind of like good energy state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say a clearer mind.
Yeah. So that little exercise, which actually was quite quick, but might have felt like a bit of a luxury. What we've done in our body is quite remarkable. So apart from engaging our vagus nerve, we started producing something called DHEA, which is a high-performance steroid, which we produce from our adrenal glands, okay? So every time we adopt that breath pattern, we produce DHEA. DHEA is a game changer for our sort of general state and status. It's there for our vitality, for longevity. Okay, it's actually a banned substance for elite athletes. As we produce DHEA, cortisol levels fall, and we bring our body more into a state of balance. Now, interesting, the research in this is unbelievable. But the research is if you can adopt paced breathing for 40 minutes a day, and you don't have to do it in a chunk, you could do this in little bite-sized pieces. So next time you're in a traffic jam, for example, you have a choice. You can have road rage, or you could use that.
Breathe.
Okay, that's the state we choose, right? This is a great example of leadership. Okay, do you want to be angry?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything about it. Or would you like to build some DHEA in your body?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Kevin, one of the things you were talking about on like even the luxury of it, like sometimes in food, it feels like you're moving from one fire, right, to the next, one fire to the next. You know, one way that I've kind of separated of like coming from a meeting, right, someone saying I need help is to say, let me go put my stuff down at my desk first. So even that time of walking to my desk, right, and let's go find a conference room, us going together somewhere, that's moments that you can be practicing your breath work and resetting your state, right, getting into a different state. Or let me just run to the restroom really quick. Even that break, right, that's some ways that you can incorporate some breaks in that small amount of time where you can do this breath work, even though it feels like you're going from one place to the next and someone's calling on you and you have to do this and you haven't responded yet. Take those breaks as they come to you, even if it's just a walk back to your desk.
Yeah, it's brilliantly said. Yeah, so we have to be mindful of those things, and I'll come back to the research on DHEA in a second, but you know, we live our life online, and a lot of us carry one of these around with us. These really stop you being present. They're also drawing a lot from our dopamine function, okay? Phones are designed to make us lean in. So even when we're not at our desks and we're moving around, we're either having thoughts or we're being hooked. We're constantly on. So unplugging ourselves, reconnecting with our natural technology is going to give us a huge leadership advantage in choosing our state and therefore choosing the outcome that we want and how we show up for other people. Okay. Now look, this research on DHEA is absolutely amazing. 3 weeks, 40 minutes a day, with a little bit of coaching actually added onto this piece of research, was evidence to increase cognitive function. So that's how smart you are. Okay. How much do you think you could increase how smart you are just by changing how you breathe? Would you like a 5% improvement in your cognitive function? Would that be a good outcome? 10%?
I think any amount would be good. 62?
62% increase in cognitive function.
Wow.
Just from changing the way you breathe, changing your internal chemistry. Imagine going on a leadership course.
Wow.
At Harvard,
yeah, that's going to be our next community challenge.
Yes. Yes. Because 60%, wow.
That's huge, right? That's going to give you clarity of thinking under pressure. Okay, in those moments where you have to make fast decisions. So the plant, something's happened with the plant. I'm going to have to shut down the line. Okay. Interestingly, we need two opposing leadership modes at the same time. Okay, this will make sense as I explain these. We need authority. Okay, we're in charge. We have to make a decision. We have to take action. Okay, and people need to do what I'm going to ask them to do. So that's authority. Okay. We also need compassion, because I'm awfully sorry. Okay. We're going to have to do something that's difficult, or maybe I'm going to delegate that to the production or the line manager and say, I'm really sorry, this is going to be a difficult day and we're going to have to do these things and they're going to have consequences. So we're combining two very opposing kind of leadership modes at the same time, compassion and authority. I'm very sorry, but we are going to do these things together. We're going to need clarity of thinking under pressure, and we're going to need to communicate clearly. And we're going to need to be empathetic, because the person we're communicating to might tell us something useful. We might say, what do you need from me to be able to do this?
Yeah.
What are the challenges we might face in doing this? What do we need to change in our schedule so that we can accommodate this change? And they'll want to feel listened to. We're generating this chemical called oxytocin. I don't know if people have heard of the chemical oxytocin. Talked about DHEA. Oh, by the way, that research, 62% smarter, 46% reduction in stress symptoms.
Oh, wow.
Just through breathing. Okay, that's because we're changing the part of our nervous system. If anyone's here who wakes up in the middle of the night, does anybody wake up in the middle of the night? I call it whizzy head. 3 o'clock, suddenly we've decided that's a good time to worry about everything. Okay, and we can't get back to sleep. So that's again a state shifter.
Yeah.
Lots of reasons that might happen. It could be your diet, a lack of glucose to the brain. Just a point on that, as leaders, our brains, we use our brains a lot, and they're glucose hungry machines. So if you're a big thinker, okay, you need to fuel yourself. Glucose, very important. If you're waking up in the night, one tip, something you might try, is a spoon of honey before you go to bed. Fuel the brain. I found that helped me. If you do wake up in the night, one of the techniques I do use, because I wake up, I run a business, and as an entrepreneur, you're always on. And I also have children and elderly parents, a lot of demands on me. And again, leadership starts with self. My go-to is paced breathing in the middle of the night. If I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't get back to sleep, I think, hey, you know what? I'll do some paced breathing. It's lovely when you're lying down.
Yeah.
More often than not, I'll go back to sleep. Worst case scenario is I'm training my body and topping up my levels of DHEA, which just that thought calms my body. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful technique. There are lots of different breath practices. I'm sure people here have come across all sorts of breath practices, certainly in Europe. Wim Hof, the Iceman, if you come across that in the States, very big in Europe. Is a guy who basically climbs mountains in his shorts and sits in ice baths for hours on end, but has learned a breath practice that enables the body to be able to adapt and cope with that. So breath is becoming very, very popular. But that one breath pattern, paced breathing, absolute game changer for our state, game changer for leadership. And Tia, a final point on that, we have a minute between meetings, from coming back from the bathroom, from going to the coffee machine. And that's all we need to change our state. Okay? Change our breath, change our posture, change our state, change our chemistry, change our behavior, even change our thoughts. Give you an exercise in a minute about thoughts. I'm going to give us one more technique, because we were talking about empathy and compassion.
Yes.
So that's breath, very simply. DHEA, lowering cortisol. We're going to talk a bit about oxytocin. Oxytocin is a game-changing chemical for leaders because it's the chemistry of trust. We talk a lot about trust, don't we, as leaders? I need to build trust. I want a high trust culture. What is trust? What is it? So I'd say it's fundamentally a feeling. Okay, we know we trust something when we feel that in our bodies.
Yeah.
Okay, and trust is largely associated with this chemical called oxytocin. And so if we can increase oxytocin levels in the people that we lead, then we'll create higher trust cultures, we'll create trust. It's also the chemistry of compassion and empathy. And when we have high levels of oxytocin in our teams, guess what? They're more likely to reach out for help and to offer help.
Yes.
Okay. Now, cortisol is the oxytocin killer. It's one of the oxytocin killers. So when teams are stressed, oxytocin rises, cortisol rises, oxytocin falls. So if you're a leader who wants your team to speak up when there's a problem, but you've got stressed teams with low trust, low psychological safety, and they're in stress states where they're struggling to speak, you're going to have problems. So oxytocin is a wonderful chemical for us to master as leaders.
Yeah.
We could generate oxytocin in a number of ways. Yes.
Kevin, I know what you just said resonates so much because we talk about that all the time. How do we have a speak up culture? How do we have a culture of empowerment? We want people to, if they see something, say something. And we try to work on processes. We hang up posters. We try to do all these things that we know what to do as technical people, as technical experts. But what you're saying, right, and the things that we talk about at Catalyst, if you could work on these other things around stress and workload and how people show up, you are more than halfway there. If you could remove, eliminate, right, reduce those things, you're halfway there to getting someone to speak up when they see something.
Yeah.
And we have not mentioned, we haven't mentioned risk assessments. We haven't mentioned CAPAs. We haven't mentioned problem solving. We haven't mentioned any of those things, but exactly what you're talking about. If you want your team to speak up, you have to start focusing on those human skills and how we show up as human beings. Draw your stick figure, right? Like what you were talking about early on to really tap into who your people are. That's how you get there. We talk about that all the time.
It is. And, even to add to that, just the awareness of a leader of, Kevin, like you said, creating this space. The other day I had a client tell me that when they were follow up on their food safety culture surveys, she had somebody who approached her and just said, hey, tell me about blah, 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 about culture. And she's in the middle of doing something and she's like, it's fine. Right? But what people perceive that is like, oh goodness, she gave me a response. And she's like, but they never created this space for them to be open, for them to actually drop in, to feel, to connect.
Yeah.
And so often we do that. And then we wonder why we still have the culture we have, because we weren't able to collect information that was meaningful and give people space and time to actually provide that meaningful feedback.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great example. I mean, the question is, what enables us to lead?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is rapport. Okay. So to lead anybody, you need to create rapport. And all rapport starts with matching where somebody is at. So if I'm in a high state of authority, let's say I've come out of a meeting, had to make some difficult decisions, probably running high levels of testosterone, because I need testosterone in my system for risk tolerance. And by the way, here's a nice trick for you. If you need to step up and have a bit more risk tolerance, a bit more confidence, so that you can speak up maybe in a meeting, and you want to just increase your levels of testosterone, this is as true for women as it is for men, anytime you firm your muscles, so I'm just putting a fist against my hand where I push my hands together. So if you firm your muscles and hold that position for 30 seconds to a minute, you're actually asking your adrenals to release a bit more testosterone.
Oh,
so if you need a bit more determination, maybe you're playing a sport. If you've got kids, okay, and they're losing, okay, you want them to step up.
Everyone.
There's no clapping. There's hold.
You may be able to feel this, right? Sometimes I use this in the gym. I use a couple of these techniques, physical intelligence techniques in the gym. Okay, I need to push that bar one more time. Strength is very important. So I need a bit more determination. And my mind was wandering, and I was thinking about what I was going to have for dinner and hugging my kids. But I need to step up, right? This is a big... So we're releasing testosterone, so we can step up to the fight. Now, if I then walk towards you in that mode and say, tell me what's wrong today. Tell me what I need to know. Okay. You might find that quite an intimidating style for me to be approached. So at least I want to access my neutrality. But what we need to do as leaders is we need to match Jung, Carl Jung always used to say, people like me like people like me. Okay. We trust people that are like us.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tia, I can see you are, you have a slight dominance to being an empathetic, compassionate, accommodating type of person, right? You listen well. Okay. So if I'm coming up to you in a very dominant style, we might have a clash. So as a leader, I might want to adopt a style that's a little bit more open and you're calm.
Yeah.
Okay. So that you'll listen to me and we can connect and I can build that rapport. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's me flexing my style. Now, how can I do that for myself? How can I increase my levels of oxytocin in my own body and calm myself down? And here's a technique called the Kate Winslet. So if you've seen the film The Titanic, have you seen the film The Titanic? We're going to change our body. And we're going to get to play the part of Rose on the front of the ship. And you can imagine whoever you want standing behind you, holding you. But if we adopt the position, the wide open, expansive body position, and you can try this. Please don't do this if you're driving. Imagine yourself on the front of the ship, looking out to sea. It helps if you kind of think of a string pulling your sternum forward and up, looking up in the edge. And that's it. What we're doing is, rather than imagining ourselves as movie stars, is we're changing the chemistry of our body. Okay, this position is evidenced scientifically to start releasing oxytocin across the chest and nitric oxide, which literally dilates the blood vessels around the heart. So we feel expansive. Okay, so we're reversing the chemistry. Oxytocin allows us to access more empathy. It's going to calm us down. It's going to enable us to build rapport. So when we're talking about things like psychological safety, there's always two sides to the story. One is, are we for ourselves creating a state where I'm able to speak up and feel safe? Okay. If I'm constantly in a contracted body position with my breathing into my chest and I feel stressed, you can create the world's best culture at work. I'm not resourcing myself to speak up.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to feel that's hard to do. Okay. So we need to do things for ourselves. The more we open and expand our body, the more the chemistry is in our favor.
Yeah.
And just an interesting point on speaking up is if you speak and breathe into your chest, this depowers the voice. Okay. So if you want to be heard, resonance comes from the belly. So this diaphragm is magical again. Resonance and being heard comes from breathing from the belly. The number one thing, well, two things that you learn when you're training as to be an actor or a performer is diaphragmatic breaths, resonance and sound and voice coming from the power, the apparatus of the belly. Okay, resonate. I don't know if you've ever spoken and if somebody else in the meeting has said something, you said, I said that earlier. No one ever hears me. Right? We have to be able to make sound, okay? We have a body. So the more we can teach people in our teams to change state. So if I am going to engage somebody, maybe I'll move them. Come for a walk with me. Let's walk and talk. Let's walk around the factory. Can I just say something about walking? Walking is transformational. Okay.
Absolutely.
You may notice when you feel different. Do you notice that?
Oh yeah. Tia knows I go out for my walk like at my lunchtime and I come back and I'm like, by the way, all these ideas or things.
Yeah.
You got all these ideas, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Best thinking time.
Why is that? Why does walking make us more creative? Do you know the answer?
Right. You're gonna tell us why.
I am going to tell you, yeah. But it's kind of like I go for a walk and suddenly I have all
We're
these
moving our
thoughts, like,
energy. We're changing our body
we're moving our
chemistry.
energy. Being outside, yeah. So the research from Stanford is, and this is equally true if you're on a treadmill. So we don't actually have to be moving. So you may notice. I mean, try walking now on the spot. I'm just doing a demonstration for people who are watching. I'm not a demonstrator. When we walk, guess what happens? If you notice what's happening in my body, we cross the central axis of our body, the central hemisphere of our body. Now, the act of doing that lights up the corpus callosum, which is at the back of our brain, and it connects the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So we're activating more of the brain, and we're making it more able for us to make connections across the brain. Okay, so that's why walking, and the evidence says we might be as much as 45% more creative or able to come up with creative and innovative ideas when we're walking than seated. Second thing that happens when we're walking.
Yeah, bringing those into your workplace. One of the favorite things my team loved was when we would do walk and talks. Yeah. Instead of everybody come into this conference room to solve this problem, hey, let's get up and walk around the plant. Like literally, let's go outside and find a trail to walk on, or walk around the outside, or walking makes such a difference with how we connect, how we think.
Total difference. And when we walk in step with somebody, when we do anything, you ever notice if you go to a class and everyone's doing the same thing, we generate higher levels of oxytocin when we're in step. Yeah. Oxytocin, you remember oxytocin? Compassion, empathy, trust, relatedness. The second really cool thing about walking is when we walk, particularly when we walk with no purpose, so don't take your phones, when we just observe nature, we release neural pathways in our brain that we don't need. Okay, that means we have more neuroplasticity, which in layman's terms means that we can learn easier. We've got more capacity for thinking. So as leaders, we're full up in our brains. We want to let go of stuff we don't need and have a tidy up. So a 20-minute walk in the morning will not only release neural pathways that aren't needed, give you more neuroplasticity, more ability to learn, and they'll clear the mind for creative thinking and ideas, plus all the benefits of circulating and moving the body. Interesting, every time you move, you release a molecule called myokines. And myokines are the hope molecule in our body, and they literally make us feel hopeful. So moving is transformational.
Amazing.
That is amazing.
It is. Wow. I know we could talk about this for hours, because I know we have not even hit the tip of the iceberg on all the information. And I know that because I have your book here, Intelligence. And it's thicker than just this hour, the hour we have together. And I hope our audience is, taking away the parts that are, resonating with them, but also seeing how we have our body, it's accessible to us right now to empower us, to support us, to serve us, and to help us be in this space in a way that helps us be our best self.
Yeah. And connecting how you show up to your leadership, right? And being able to move states, right? From whether it's from a meeting or you had a difficult conversation to now I need to go and present in front of the whole plant, or now I need to have a conversation with someone else that's completely different. that just sets you up for what type of leader, right, you are showing up as. And Kevin, even when you were talking about that, I think about leaders that I felt connected to. They were able to shift their states when I'm having conversations with them. The ones that did not, I almost shifted my state to figure out what's going on with them, right? And then I find out information, right, that could help me or could help them, right, shift their state. But I'm helping them in that situation versus me coming to you and then I'm like, ooh, okay, what's going on with you, right? But as a leader, it's important for us to recognize that, right? Where it's like, I need to show up to help my team, right? I need to show up here. Or sometimes I do need to show up with someone and say, hey, let's talk about what I have going on. But you want to be aware of that and you want to make sure that that is intentional versus I'm showing up this way because I just had a difficult conversation, even though I don't mean to show up that way. So, that's one thing that resonated for me. But one thing that I know that people have talked to us about struggling with, right? As they have so much going on, how do they build those things around trust and relationships and, speak up, right? How do we get our people to speak up? Well, it starts with these fundamentals of how do you interact with human beings, right? How do you interact with your being self? And then how does your self interact with other human beings? That's at the core.
Yeah, it's a lovely summary. And, just to summarize, so we can choose our state. Okay, people will trigger states in us, but we can choose our state much more than we think. And what a gift when we're coming home to our families and our partners and people that we love. Do we walk in the door bringing home work and all that stress? Or do we sit in the car, take a moment, change our state and walk in the room? We want to be connected with our families and our children and be there for them and not bring all of that stuff in. We can choose that. The more you practice it, the better you'll get. And I would just say, in terms of leadership, we can all access all of these characteristics with authenticity. So the more we practice them, the more we find our own way of being authoritative, our own way of being compassionate, our own way of being inspirational. Okay, make those feel like yourself. The more we can practice moving between those states, the more flexibility you can build in. Absolute game changer. As Jill was saying, there's a book called Physical Intelligence, which is kind of like a manual that we should have all been given when we were born, how we work. There's 100 techniques and 175 pieces of research in there, so I don't want to leave people in the lurch. Yeah. And you can find a lot of this work online as well.
And while it's thick, it's so well written. Like I've done several chapters the past few days just because you've got great stories, but also just very clear on like, here's something you can do. So I like that it also includes the science, but it also is very practical and lets you it gives you challenges right now to be able to tap into your own physical intelligence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So our audience can.
I would say.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and as leaders, because we want to teach this to our teams, having the science and having the research allows you to make the woo-woo wow-wow, okay? Mm-hmm. If you can explain why something might work, your teams are more likely to go, okay, I'm going to embrace this. It's not some esoteric kind of thing you've just learned. It's some really odd environment. So use the science and use the research and invite people to lean in.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. This has been such a great conversation, a lot of information, right, to think about, and hopefully people will choose, right, to incorporate it into their leadership. Jill had up your book. We are connected to you on LinkedIn. How does our audience find out more? How do they connect with you and find out more about this?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Chapman, and also if you look up the physicalintelligenceinstitute.com, we have a ton of resources in there. We have a program called Body Smart, which anyone can take. In fact, we have a number of organizations that are putting teams through that to upskill people in managing state, managing themselves. And then we also train coaches and leaders. We have an accredited program with the ICF and the Institute of Organizational Neuroscience. to put this third untapped intelligence into the hands of us all.
Into practice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you for spending part of your day with us and with our audience. And I know people might want to go back to this. So we're going to link it on our blog, but it's also on YouTube. So go back and learn more about the breathing practices and exercises. And for sure, check out the book and check out the website. Yes. So, and for our audience, we will be back here same time,
Will be.
same place next week. And we look forward to seeing you then.
Until then, enjoy your week and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.